Hello, and thank you for joining us here at Finding the Healer Within. In today's episode, we explore the Centennial Gardens, which are a collection of gardens in Herman Park that was built in 2014. The gardens consist of the Arid Garden, the Celebration Garden, the Family Garden, the Rose Garden, and the Woodland Garden. That includes a 30-foot garden mount where you can see far and wide. Here in these gardens, you can find sculptures, volunteer opportunities, and people like my friend Kit and Rory that can guide you on your volunteering journey, which I must say is a treat. Enjoy the episode and be sure to visit the gardens and enjoy this beautiful Houston park that is free for everyone. How's it going, Rory? How's everything?
Yeah, it's good. It's really hot today.
Yeah, it is. And you just got off of work here at, in the gardens, right?
Yeah, from 6:30 now 3 p.m. So.
Wow, that's a lot. And you do that every day, like 5 days a week, or like?
Yeah, 5 days a week now. Yep.
That's awesome. So, like, what got you into working with plants? Like, what led you there?
Yeah. So, I think what set me up for it was like I came to college in Houston. I'm originally grew up outside of Austin, came to college here in Houston, and then the second week after I moved here for my freshman year was Hurricane Harvey.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never been in a hurricane before. It was such an intense experience. But then I think after that, I guess just our generation in general was always concerned about climate change.
Yeah.
I think seeing sort of the like environmental justice impacts that came out of that, I was like, okay, I want to work in the environment. I want to do something with the environment. I ended up kind of exploring that. I worked at a nonprofit called Air Alliance Houston. They work with like air pollution, especially like in the East End around all
the refineries. Yeah.
In Pasadena. So I did that and I hated it, not because of the work, but because I was like sitting at a desk, like filling out spreadsheets and stuff like that. And I was like, wow.
Doing like the clerical work kind of side of it.
Yeah. I was just like, man, I can't be in a desk staring at a computer. I don't have the attention span for it.
Same, yeah.
Yeah. So then after that year, I was like, maybe like gardening would be cool. Like I want to work with plants. That sounds cool. And so I just searched up urban farming Houston, went to a bunch of different places and ended up finding like this little internship at a different nonprofit here called Plant It Forward. I just loved it. I'd also read this book because I studied anthropology.
Oh, cool, me too. Yeah.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, that's so funny.
I'm like nerding out right now. This is really fun. Yeah, so I had read this book called Fresh Fruit, Broken Bodies, which maybe I can lend you the copy or something.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, so his name was like Seth Holmes, I think, anthropologist, and his, doing his field work. He worked alongside migrant farm workers in like California that were like picking tomatoes and things like this. So yeah, like I think a lot of us are familiar with what that sort of work is like.
Yeah, it's intense.
Yeah, for him, he was talking about how like in his research method he called it like embodied anthropology, because he was saying like so much of the work he was doing, it's not so much like thinking and observing like theory, but it's like it's what he's feeling. It's like it's what's in his body. It's that tiredness at the end of the day, that total exhaustion,
that draining of energy. Yeah,
exactly. And then of course like the people he's working with, he's learning about these health issues that they're facing because of the work they do, the literal backbreaking work. It's like this concept of like embodied anthropology and like learning through like experience and like the actual doing of something with your physical body was like, I guess, heavy on my mind. So then when I was out there on these urban farms for Plant It Forward, I'm there for 8 hours a day. It's so hot in the middle of the summer. But by like from May to like August, I realized that and I guess maybe so at Plant It Forward, these are refugee farmers who don't necessarily speak like a whole lot of English. The people that I was working with, I really just like learned they'd show me kind of how to do it, and I just kind of watch and just try and emulate like
what their methods.
Yeah, exactly. And so they tell me like, oh, like this is a leaf that's ready to harvest. This one's not ready. And at the beginning, I was like, I have no idea what the difference is between these. Like, I'm just gonna try my best
Yeah, because it's so subtle.
It's subtle, yeah. It's like you have to be familiar. But then I found by the end of the internship, I was like, oh, like I can tell like when it's ready to harvest by like the specific shade of green it is, and the specific shine of it, and like the specific size. And so I think that just like made me fall in love with it. You know, I was like, wow, like I've learned so much. It's not something I can exactly explain. It's something I feel.
Like, do you use any like knowledge from your ancestors of like how to like plant things and stuff?
Oh, that's funny. I was about to like say that. Like, like plants are my ancestors, you know. And the thing is too is like I'm not an expert at any means. Like I've literally just learned this by working in it, and like I took like one class in college that was about urban agriculture. Obviously, I studied anthropology, so I didn't really get to learn a lot of the science, but just through doing it. But on plant ancestors, you know, like it's like humans, like agriculture is such an interesting like science, I guess is what you call it, because it's how plants have developed through their interactions with humans. It's how humans have influenced it, right? So like you think of like corn was like developed from like a wild plant into something that eventually fed humans because they bred it over generations. And because, you know, you do it in a season, it's like an annual crop, you can have that genetic change really quickly.
So that's how they did it.
Right.
Like, yeah, that's how they figured it out.
Brassica oleracea is it's like cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, kale, kohlrabi. These are all the same mother plant. Basically.
Really?
Yeah, and then humans cultivated it.
I see.
Yeah, it's like that genetic variation, and then humans cultivated and selected it over time.
Like whatever was more desirable or tasted better or something.
So like that's like one way, like I just, or it's like you have a plant, like an okra plant or like a bean plant, like they actually produce better when you pick more from them because you take more and then they're able to put in new energy to like their new buds and stuff like that.
Wow, so it's almost like it's done growing, so take me off the plant and then let me grow some more.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
Right, because maybe you'd assume, I think it's like, humans and nature have like a antithetical relationship sometimes, but actually no, like you can have a really beautiful one.
Yeah, because we are nature. We're a piece of it. Like we, you know, they tend to say that we're at the, you know, top of the pyramid, but there's no pyramid. It's a circle.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. And so like I learned from the plants, like they teach me things.
Yeah.
It's also even like, you know, also part of it is connecting with my heritage. So, you know, being mixed. My mom's from the Philippines. I was born in Texas, and then my dad's white. And so in the American context, I mean, literally having the education around the Philippines being stolen and colonized and pushed out, right? So I don't know anything. And so now like that I'm getting to learn more, you know, I'm learning like ginger, like all the plants of the ginger family are endemic to Southeast Asia. And like if you think about the foods that like Filipinos eat, like ginger is such a common ingredient. Yeah, so just these like ginger is a good one. Like long beans or moringa. These are like the English names. These are like staples of the food that my people eat, right? And it's because those plants grow there and because they took care of them. So it's like that relationship too, if that makes sense. Yeah,
between the plants and the people. Yeah, because they kept that part of their culture in a sense. So their connection to the land, their intact culture. Which like was always prevalent even in the times of the colonizer coming in. Like there's a Spanish, no, at some point. Yeah, which is interesting because it's so far from Spain. You know, like, you think maybe like some Asian country would have come and that was on the coast.
Yeah, there. So that's so interesting. Like the history of the Philippines. So it's really like pre-colonial times. People came from Malaysia, so they're Malay people. Also from China, so there's Chinese origins. And so you still see that in some of like the city names and things like that. But then Spanish came, I guess like 1500s. And so they dominated the Philippines for 400 years. And then at the Spanish-American War, basically what came out of that war was Spain conceding the Philippines as a territory and Cuba as a territory to the United States. So then the United States became our colonizer.
Wow, at that point.
Yeah. And then there was, in the time of World War II, Japan became an imperial power. So they were the colonizers for a few years, and that was like a really brutal period too. Because they, I guess because they tried to be like Western too, and modeled this like empire after it. And so they had, I mean, they also like colonized parts of China and in Asia, and so that's where you see like comfort women. Japanese are really responsible for a lot of that.
But even with all that, these like cultural like practices developed and continued. Like here, for instance, the Native Americans talk about the sister plants.
Yes.
And you do that here at the Centennial Gardens.
That, yeah. No, so man, like I could honestly go so many ways. So talking about indigenous perspectives and agriculture, specifically like on Turtle Island, is like so important. I read this book. Have you read the book Grading Sweetgrass?
Yes.
Yeah. So
that made me cry a couple times. I'm not gonna lie.
Beautiful. Like
it was so nice. And because it combines science and like the understanding of like that you're speaking of. Yeah.
Exactly, which is so lost and sometimes. And and like that's where I learned from Robin Wall Kimmerer, like that idea. She was like, oh, like these ecology students think human and nature are antithetical, but really they're together.
Yeah.
And so just so much of what that book said, like I really just has stayed with me, and it really changed what I did and how I've kind of gone down this path. And so like the Three Sisters is a chapter in there. Such a beautiful, amazing kind of work of science that the corn, the beans, and the squash all work together. And so it's like you plant them all at the same time. The corn grows up the tallest quickly, and it becomes basically what the beans can grow on, right?
Right. And so it's like the scaffolding or whatever.
Yeah, trellis instead of that. It's just the corn, and then the squash leaves that go kind of horizontally, and so they end up kind of shading that ground where all the seeds are planted, and the roots are, and so it kind of keeps it really protected, like the roots of those plants. The beans put nitrogen into the soil, which feed the corn and the squash as they're growing and producing.
That's awesome.
And then they're all ready to do. And then nutritionally, it's like a complete diet is
for each of them.
Yeah, like together, like having the corn, the squash, and the beans, like gives you like a really hearty, like nutritious meal.
Oh, like even as a base for all your nutrition.
Yeah, just like as a meal together. So
wow. And is that like the only 3 plants that are like that, or there's other plants like that now?
Yeah, there are other plants like that. I'm having like there's like a whole idea of like companion planting in gardening. So that's like certain plants are basically symbiotic relationships. Either like they exchange the same nutrients, or they attract the natural predators of pests of the plant, things like that. So like in this garden, we plant tomatoes with marigolds.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and the scent of the marigolds basically wards off one of the biggest tomato predators, like pests. It's called the leaf-footed bug. And so we find that has really, instead of having to like spray for the scale
natural
that we're
pesticide
doing, exactly. Or even like I always forget her name, but I think it's Vandana Shiva. She's a feminist activist from India, and like her feminism, like her feminist activist is about the women who work the fields in India, basically these peasant farm workers, and so there's like this podcast, and I mean she does so much work, but have you heard For the Wild?
No.
You would really love it. I think.
It's a podcast?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
They they're interested in these concepts of like human nature relationships, stuff like that.
I like them.
I think you'd really like it. And anyway, so like I heard her speak there, but she was talking about biodiversity. So that's another thing, like with planting the plants together, it's increasing the biodiversity, right? You have 2 types of plants, you have more types of plants. And for her, she talks a lot about agroforestry. So like prior to colonial methods of agriculture in India, most of the vegetables and the produce was grown among forests, like around treed areas. So you think of like farms, maybe these like big open fields or like flat. I mean, even if they're not monocultures, like they're trying to like maximize as much sun.
Right.
So, but what she's found is that actually like the forest like can provide a lot of shade and those kind of nutrients that the vegetables need, and so it's more productive.
Wow, than a flat field.
Yeah, and so that's like beyond like the type of plants. You think about the lighting and like the heights and the structure of the canopy and things like that. And I couldn't even explain it because it's just so amazing. It's something I should study really. But also like she was saying, like on her farm that she does, she's like, we actually have more biodiversity on our farm than the surrounding forest because of the way we practice, and that's why it's so prolific.
But here with the like you have raised beds, no?
Okay,
like
yeah.
And does that make a difference in like how the plants grow or?
Yeah, it's helpful in Houston specifically because Houston has such clay soils.
Right.
So that means it's like it's rainy, we're at sea level. The soil is getting like compacted and it's just really thick, and that's hard for plants, vegetable plants to really grow in because they need to be able to expand. And then it's hard to get a lot of like nutrients in that soil because it's so compacted and just rained out, so they can only take the nutrients. So the raised beds helps. It really helps having that like loose soil to grow in. It also helps with like drainage so that the water has more space to like percolate through rather than just sitting like at this flat area.
Oh. So the dirt is very important as well, and I imagine like working with dirt all the time, like you get dirty, right? But it must feel like amazing, like for your energy, like to constantly be flowing through these plants, you know?
Oh yeah, no. I remember like when I first learned about it. This was before I even started, but it was like Urban Harvest. They're like a big organization here in Houston that does community gardens, and so I was volunteering there, and like the guy, we were like, he had brought in this compost, and he was like, we were laughing because he was like talking about how beautiful the compost was. He's like, just smell this. It's so amazing. We're like, this guy's gonna marry the compost.
He's getting up close and personal. Yeah.
But it's true actually. It is scientific that like good compost, like healthy compost, shouldn't smell like gross dead things. It smells. It's different, but it smells alive, you know. And it has like chemicals or whatever in it that affect your brain chemistry. And so actually, like, you know, it's like touch grass, like touching soil does like change your brain. Yeah, it's like it's almost like constantly grounding. Like I think so. I think it is like spiritual. That's beautiful. Like just here in Houston, though, as much as it rains here, like how do you deal with that in the gardening? Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I think like definitely I would say like I love what I do. Like there's other stresses about it which we could get into, which I'm sure we will eventually in this conversation. But yeah, like the actual work, it does make me feel really good. Obviously it keeps me healthy, which is like difficult I think in like our capitalistic society where you're just like worked. It can also go the other way, right? Where it's like sometimes during the summer I'm like, oh my god, I'm like so tired and like so like learning how much your body can take was like a journey, I guess, for me. But yeah, like even it definitely is like I'll be having like a shitty day or something like that, and then I'll like walk by and I'll smell a rose and I'll be like, this is beautiful. You literally stop and smell the roses. Yeah, I'm like I just feel like so held by Mother Nature, you know, when I'm out here and I'm having a bad time. Yeah, you've also done classes because you did a class over at Manil Park one day. Okay, yeah. So so this is that was like really my first venture. So I hosted this workshop, and I was with my organization that I'm in, which is called Anakbayan. So Anak means youth or like child. Yeah. So like in like Filipino households, like you'll hear the mom be like, Anak, like come here. So that's like child, and then bayan means like country. So it means children of the country, children of the nation. And it's because we're a militant organization of youth, like from all over. It's we're an overseas chapter here in Houston, but it started in the Philippines, and we're anti-fascist and anti-imperialist.
Yeah.
So we're fighting for national democracy in the Philippines with a socialist perspective.
Interesting.
Which means national in the sense that we are sovereign from foreign influence, or like this kind of history of colonization and the neoliberal colonization that continues to occur, and then democratic in that everyone in the country has a right and has a say and is participating in how it's run.
Yeah, because it's been under someone else's rule for most of its history now.
Right. Yeah. So and then of course we say socialist perspective because we also, for us, see we don't believe in capitalism. We want the alternative to that. We want the oppressed masses of the workers, the proletarians, and of the peasants, and of the indigenous peoples to have to be the rulers of their society. Not so, as opposed to what it is these days. It's the ruling elite. It's the 1%. And that even in the Philippines, there's a ruling class. And so that to kind of answer your question, like there are Filipino families, names that you'll hear over and over, and they'll be the same names who are owning all of the corporations, who are the big landlords, and who are holding the big government positions.
So they're like cycling through all the money through themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's basically been, it's because we consider the Philippines semi-feudal. So it comes out of the Spanish colonization, the encomienda, the hacienda system. So they parceled out these lands, gave it to the powerful families, and it's kind of just persisted. These people are the same people because they have access to the wealth who are in control of the country. So you'll hear the Marcos, Arroyo, Duterte, Estrada family. Those four families are some of the most powerful families in the Philippines. And right now, Marcos Jr. is the president. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's totally, mixing the bag and shaking it, Yeah. And so, like in the Philippines, so those ruling class families collaborate with the U.S. foreign imperialists. And so for the U.S. foreign imperialists, which are like these big monopoly capitalists, they basically can use the Philippines as a market for their goods. If they want to develop, like maybe they have realty or tourism or infrastructure construction. And so they can say, hey, we can do this for you. And then the ruling class families welcome it because these contracts are really profitable for them, and they can divert those funds back to themselves because they have power with impunity. That makes sense. So that's why we say it's still semi-colonial in addition to semi-feudal, is that these foreign imperialists therefore have a huge say in how our government runs. It's just such a small space. There's many people there, like it's a pretty big city. It's 111 million people. Yeah, in the Philippines. And that's such a small space because how big comparatively is the Philippines? That's a good question. To Texas. I know everything's bigger in Texas. We have to do that website that overlays it. Right? Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. Yeah. Because it's like 7,000 islands. It's 3 main ones. Wow. But yeah, so it's and the U.S. military still they just opened bases in the Philippines, and they have a really tight connection with the Philippines. I read about that recently. That was within the past 10 years, something like that. Yeah. Last year in the 90s, there was a movement to push all of these bases out, and then they just opened up with the new president. So yeah, all the politics there. Basically, the U.S. still has a semi-colonial relationship to the Philippines. In the Philippines, 10% of the GDP comes from migrant labor. They say 6,000 Filipinos leave the country every day to find work because, and this is the Philippines, which I know, but this is the kind of the situation for most of the global South. So a lot of Latin American countries, right? That the U.S. used it as a colony for so long to dump, and they do what's called export oriented, import dependent So the Philippines, because they were producing these kind of raw resources and materials that the United States needed and didn't have in the country, all of that got exported. And so our economy is built on exportation, and it's not actually feeding the people and going to the people of the Philippines.
Yeah, because everything that's produced is sent out. Basically.
Yeah, and so there's a really low industrial capacity of the Philippines. Like everything is imported, so we're dependent on imports from the imperial core because that's the only model that's been like used to develop the country.
And how would this group, this organization, how would they restructure that in a way that would be beneficial to everyone?
Yeah, so that's like the socialist part of it.
I see.
So you think like Cuba is like a really good example, but like socialism is talking about national industrialization. So the big ones we talk about in the Philippines are national industrialization and land reform, because we analyze it based on these industries are owned by foreign monopoly capitalists or by the ruling class elite, but they should be providing goods and making goods for the people that live there. So if we had a democratic government that is actually controlled by the Philippine people and is sovereign from foreign control, then that's the national industrialization. The nation owns the industry. And so then they can direct what it's used for. And so that's what Cuba did. And then so like the other part is land reform. Like we talked about like how it's very semi-feudal. There's all these landlords who own everything. All of that land should be redistributed to the people who didn't work on it, basically.
Yeah, so they own the land.
They own the land and they can decide how to use it and how to produce themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because all of it's basically set based on the interests of a few. And that's what causes like the poverty and the hunger. Even though we say this phrase like the Philippines is rich, but its people are poor.
Yeah, much like Africa and formerly, because now they're kind of doing the same thing and taking over and taking their lands back, you know, because it's not, there's so many, everything has been colonized. Yeah. It's so interesting that you do these workshops so that people can understand more the relationship between these with people and plants, so that they can better understand your organization.
So that workshop, we called it the Kamote workshop, and it was all about this concept, which is lupa ay buhay. Lupa means land, and buhay is life. So the phrase is land is life. And this is like a lot of
water is life.
Water is life. Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's like land back. Yeah. Also. And so it's what the Filipino activists use to talk about that, like land is paramount, like land is everything, and that is like the root cause. And so once the land is redistributed, that is what would be the basis for social change and for equality and true democracy. And so in the workshop, we were looking specifically at Kamote. And so we were talking about how far like Spain is from the Philippines. And then of course we have like the same colonizer, right? Spain colonized all Latin America. And I learned this from a Filipino artist friend, that Kamote is, and it's the same in Spanish, but in Filipino it's spelled with a K. But is actually, that word is not of Spanish origin, it's of Nahuatl origin. And so it basically came to the Philippines by way of that Spanish colonization, where they took it from these people and brought it there.
Wow, like almost like a dandelion in the wind spreading seeds to the land.
Wow. Like, we know this through like the Atlantic, the triangle trade. But it's like a really beautiful example, and it grows really well in the Philippines because it is also subtropical, and it grows really well in Houston because we are subtropical. Yeah. And it's super easy to grow. Like, so that's why we focused on the kamote for the workshop. It's because we wanted people to kind of get into this process of growing with us.
But plants that like grow best in this land, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like, because we're all basically displaced Filipinos living in Houston, and so the kamote is like a symbol, of like basically finding a new life. And you find like a lot of immigrants, like one of the key things they bring with them when they leave is like their seeds, and things like that, so that they can grow and they can eat.
Like these workshops are a way of you staying connected with that was stolen from you almost, yeah?
Yeah, and so it's just the one workshop, and it's like the process is that we like distributed camote slips among our community, and so like in October we're anticipating our harvest.
Oh, cool.
But basically for me it was like I've been doing all this growing work, and like for me it was all connected to like the process of like I guess decolonization, right? And like fighting and resistance. But my organization, like we had focused more on like the political education and stuff. And so we're like, okay, like we're gonna marry this, and so that was like this is our first time doing it, and so it's in development, I guess.
So that's awesome, because like intent is nothing without action, and that's what you guys are doing with those workshops. But do you have any more workshops planned or anything else?
No, not at the moment, but I'm sure there will be more. And yeah, so maybe what's it like? Stay on the lookout for
Yeah,
it.
there you go. Yeah.
But yeah, like I would love to talk about just the Comote workshop too. So like that's one thing, is that it grows just like we grew. Like it had that story of displacement, just like us. The other thing, and like a lot of this I learned from my friend, from this artist who does a lot of community work. But also like it's very easy to store, and you can store it for like months at a time, and it's very nutritious. Like it has like beta carotene and vitamins, and so there's like the person who founded Urban Harvest, Bob Randall. He said like, oh, like if you were going to live off the land in Houston, sweet potato would be a large part of your diet, because it's so easy to grow and it's so prolific and caloric dense. And so that's also like a beautiful thing about it, is that like, for people who are experiencing poverty, this is something that could feed you for a long time, and it could feed you well and be healthy for you. The other last thing I'd say about it, that we chose it, was because so one big political issue, mass issue in the Philippines is seeds, because kind of what has developed are these companies who do these seeds called like golden rice. And so it's these kind of foreigners who are looking at the issue of hunger and poverty, and because they're committed to capitalism, they don't understand that capitalism is the issue. They think innovation is the issue. They think, we have to change something else. Exactly. We need to find these seeds that like work better in these conditions and are more disease resistant. But sweet potato, they'll literally give out seeds. They call them suicide seeds, because they're like, I guess, hybridized, so they can't reproduce. You can't save the seed and use it for the next season. Yeah. And like we were talking about biodiversity, like being able to grow in the same place and like pass on those genetics to the next plant is what's key to having like resiliency against diseases and things like that, because your previous lineages already dealt with these same weather conditions, climatic conditions. But sweet potato, it's like, when you leave a potato like in your pantry for so long, and then you turn and it has like little green buds, or sometimes like leaves, or like your garlic will have that. It grows the same way. Like it just does it. It's the plant that you eat also produces the plant. Let's say you have a big potato harvest, you save one plant, and you can start your whole garden, your whole farm again next year, just based on what you saved from last year. Yeah, exactly. It's continuing that cycle. Yeah, you only need a few of them. You could eat the rest and enjoy it, and then you just do it again. So that's why like we chose camote. And like so like my friend, I'll plug her real quick. On Instagram, she's Killjoyland. So her name is Killjoy. So she also like just recently did a workshop for our community and she's done this in the Philippines, working with some of the activist groups there, that uses sweet potato as a stamp. So she does a lot of printmaking. And so we cut letters into the sweet potato, like we cut it in half, and then we cut out a letter, and then we rolled ink onto it, and then we printed. I see. Yeah, it was so cool. So it was like in the whole room, we all did like a different letter of the alphabet, and then like we all would just like, she gave us prints of a design she had, and I can send you that picture too. Yeah. And we got to pick a phrase basically to write. And so she also did this like in the Philippines, and I forgot where. I think they made posters like for a community mural. Something similar to that. I might have it wrong. So yeah, like it's like also like it has a lot of uses, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. And then like with the Comote workshop, like the idea was that it's not just about the workshop itself, but the process of growing. So like now we have like a group chat of the folks who take the plants home, and we're sharing some tips about plants. But then like the idea is that at the end we're gonna harvest together and make the food together and like feed each other.
Yes.
Right. And so like when you're talking about like building like a new world and like resisting, like it's what you need to do is be able to take care of each other.
Yeah.
And like do it outside of the system that's already done. So yeah, like basically that's what we said. It's like we're inviting you into this like process, like not only of like growing, it's not just about feeding yourself, because the truth is that the earth is abundant. Like there is more than enough for everyone. The scarcity and the poverty is manufactured by the system we live in. And so what we're also inviting is like this process of change within yourself of like, how has like this system made me so like isolated and individualized from the community around me? And how do we rebuild that? Because we do have to build it ourselves. And so that is like we're all growing this together, literally. So like that's how we're being connected. But throughout, it's also asking like in your daily life, like how are you, like how are these things, that these ideologies that are pushed on you, these habits that you have to engage in, how are they taking you away from community? So that's like with Anakbayan, like with our organization, we make this pledge to serve the people. So where our life purpose is not about ourselves as individuals, which does not mean to say like neglect yourself, but it means that ultimately you're doing this for your people. Yeah, for the generations to come, people that are, coming after you or they're with you. Like you said, you guys are going to harvest a meal together and feed each other, harvest vegetables together and feed each other. Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing, because like people don't do that much anymore. It's not like, let's do a potluck or something. Like some people do, and that's important, like to maintain that community, that connection to each other. Because what are you going to be connected to? Like a machine, it's either a machine or nobody or somebody, And it sometimes, I know, especially in this day and age of like more awareness of things like like being autistic and things like that, it's more difficult to make those connections. But it's okay to make connections where like you don't have to force yourself into places where you're uncomfortable. You find a place that you find comfort, but you'll never find it unless you go there. You have to put yourself. Exactly. Like it's not going to be easy or perfect. I mean, you are going to have to. That's the thing. It's like if we're going to govern ourselves, like when issues come up, we need to be able to solve them. But we're trying to not do it through like domination. Yeah. Right? We're doing it through like persuasive, like collaboration. Right? And like when you're actually there for people, then of course they're going to be able to do more for you. Man, yeah, like it's just all of that. Yeah. No, that's awesome, because I never heard of this organization, but I'm so glad I did, because it's another example of groups wanting that same thing, connection, community, and just kind of creating their own space for it. And that's what's needed. Like, it's not a competition. You can, like anybody wanting to do anything that if I know about it, I'll give you information. That's all. It's free. What is it to me? Yeah, like I think in like a lot of socialists, there's like adages and stuff. Like one is like take what works, and leave the rest. So it's like it's not, so don't get so much into the theory of it, into talking about it, but do it, and then as it comes up, it works like and it's like you can accept criticism from anywhere, even from someone who's maybe like bougie capitalist. Like if they have a right idea, then they have the right idea, and you use it. Yeah. It's just but what means, like for whom, it's for the people. Yeah. But even with the work, like all this work that you do, like just in the community as well as here at work, like just dealing with the weather. How do you like unwind and like release all that? That's a good question. Yeah, well, for me, I think like the work that you do, like if you're doing it with people that care about the same things, that is what makes you feel like moralized. That is what is motivating. And so like actually like, you know, I do enjoy working with the plants, but all these places I've worked at have been like these like nonprofits, and like the whole premise of the nonprofit industrial complex is coming out of this like neoliberal attitude where it's like these things that the government used to pay for, you know, and used to say like, okay, like this is a public good and it actually helps, so it's worth it to put the money here, even if it doesn't necessarily return a profit. They wanted to phase that out, and so they gave it to these public-private partnerships, which are nonprofits, which are just basically where donors get to give their money, have tax write-offs, feel really good about it. But there's never enough money, and they keep these huge endowments, and that they're used to reinvest and to build up. And then the people like at the top of the nonprofit get paid really nice wages, and the people at the bottom don't. And they want to keep like a lean model because they don't want to spend more money than they're getting out of it. So it's not actually like nonprofit. Like they still are concerned about profits. They just try to put the twist in. Yeah, instead of like the business making the profit, it's just all through donation. So at these nonprofits, like I find they're always tell you, oh, like we don't have enough people to do that, or like the people that are doing that right now are overworked. We don't have money for that because we can't buy stuff, like we can't buy things that we can't explain to the donors, like why it's useful, things like that. And so like,
so they're in control.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing with like a little bit of a ethical wash over it. But it works the same way. And so I think like I love what I do, but there's very little, because we live in the society. I can't really do it for pay, like in the way that would actually be like just and amazing. You know? So like the work I do is stressful just because of the people who are in charge. So that is definitely like a struggle. I mean, I think being able to find like my coworkers and my peers who are dealing with the same stuff, and just being able to talk to them about it and like share the information, like you were saying, and be human like that is a release.
And connect at the same time and create community.
Creating is a great way.
So you not only create with your coworkers here in the space, but you create with them just by just being like sounding boards for each other and helping each other with frustrations they can come up with the job and things like that.
Yeah, and we learn so much. Like that's why I like really wanted to work here. Like I learned so much from my coworkers, honestly. And then there's also like the physical aspects. One thing like I've had to really maintain and struggle with is like my physical health. Like when I was I sprained my ankle in service work like 2021, and like I couldn't afford like going to the doctor or anything, and it wasn't like a break, but it's always kind of left like an unhealed tendon in my ankle. And so like doing like there's like what I've had is that once a year, like my whole leg will be in so much pain that I can't move. It happens usually in the cold weather, so but like it's just like that one, the way my muscles are like overcompensated for that injury. Like if I really push myself too hard, like ends up hurting me. And then of course we work in like the stress. Like last year, and like right now it's hot, but last summer was so hot because there's no rain. And so like literally after noon, like you cannot move around in the sun without like feeling heat exhaustion. Especially if you've already been working for 6 hours that day. And so like that's like a learning process, just actually learning to like, okay, these are my body's limits. Like, so I mean, it keeps you healthy in a way, because we have to figure out like, okay, like what is actually going to feed me for the whole day? Like I need to eat well. Like I can't just eat junk and do this. And so, like I said, like, we have like these issues of health in America, of like sedentary lifestyle, but it's because we never were supposed to be doing all that, and like usually you'd be productive. But so like the challenge of that question you asked me is like, I still have to remind myself that I can't just keep going all the time. And that like the work is important, but having it be fulfilling is also really important, and not something that's just stressing me out where I'm like, well, like we're doing this event and I have to get all this stuff done. It has to be perfect. So I think it's challenged me to like kind of change my standards, and also like not do things so much by myself, but like ask for help. Like that Comote workshop, like I did all those plants and like it was like with volunteer help that we raised them, but then like my friends helped me load all the plants into the car. Like when we got there, they helped me write all these labels for hundreds of plants, and we just did it all together. And like that, I think for me, like, you know, we talk about self-care as like, and that's like very individual. But you also have to like, having people support you is a more effective way of like taking care of yourself.
Because you're not like taking it all on yourself. That's awesome, because you're reinforcing that community with the work that you're doing, that you're getting paid for to pay your rent and keep you going, but at the same time being part of the change with these organizations that you're involved with. So I really appreciate like just all the work that you do, and like the energy that you contribute to the world is very important. Like I hope you know. But I really appreciate just you sharing your information with us and knowledge, because it's so well rounded. Like you studied people and culture, and now you're going into plants, and that's beautiful. So hopefully we'll get you to write a book, and then
No, like I said, I'm not an expert. I learn something new every day. One thing I love about this job particularly is that it's free parking, free gardens. You can just walk in, and people, because the medical center is right there, I talk to people from like all over the world. And like they come and they're like, they'll see a plant and they'll be like, let me tell you about this plant and about how my family used to cook it and how we grow it, and like this is how we prune it. And that, so I get to learn so much that way. People have like gifted plants that we've been able to grow here, So,
and that's beautiful, because that takes the local connection that you make with the community that you have and extends it all around the world without doing anything but just talking and conversing about what you've planted, what you've cultivated in a space that reminds them of home.
Exactly.
And that's just a human connection. Like we all really are interconnected, not only, down to the cosmic level. So do you have any like medicinal plants that you go to for certain things?
That's such a good question. Like I didn't grow up with that. So I'm like learning more about it. So I'm definitely not like a authoritative, or like I'm a learning vein. Like ginger I've become like really fond of. It's like got that fire element, and so like awakens, like sick, really congested, like loosens and like gets things going again.
Ginger is so powerful, because it can help you with nausea if you can just chew it if you're like super nauseous.
That one's from Southeast Asia. So when I learned that, I was like, oh, like it's meant to be. But no, I love what you're saying too about like connecting with like the family too, and like because like it's so much of what we're like losing because of the way the world has developed. And I mean, literally, I'm a product of that. Like I didn't know anything, and so I started to do that. So it's just like, actually, like you asked about medicinal plants. Like I didn't go out and talk to my Lola, my grandma, about it, and I don't speak the same language as her, but she speaks Ilocano. But like I got to bring her to this garden, and she was basically like pointing at all these plants. I was like, look, this, because I learned the Filipino names for it. And so I was like showing her plants, and she was really excited, and she's telling my mom, she's like, oh, we use this for like these medicinal uses, or like this is good for your heart, this is good for your cholesterol and stuff like that. So I would really love to learn more.
And that's beautiful, because that's like another example of like how you're taking advantage of the knowledge that our elders have while they're here, because once they're gone, that knowledge is gone, that language is gone, unless we practice it and continue to cultivate it and take it into the future. But I definitely think that you're going to be doing that and so many more great things.
Thank you so much, Adriana. This has been a really amazing conversation. I'm so flattered, but like I also just really like talking to you. So thank you.
I'm so happy we were able to get together.
Remember to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. On Facebook, you can find us under Finding the Healer Within, and Instagram at Finding the Healer Within 432. See you around the fire.